It was the kind of silence that made your heart race. Everyone in the Oak Ridge County Courthouse, judge, jury, lawyers, onlookers, they were frozen. The kind of freeze that only happens when something unspeakably wrong is unfolding right in front of you. In the center of it all, sitting timidly on the witness stand, was a 9-year-old blind girl named Emily Dawson. Her cane rested beside her like a tired soldier. Her pale blue dress, the one she wore to her mother's funeral 6 months ago, was wrinkled, clutched tight by her nervous hands. She didn't speak. She just sat there, trembling, alone. "Miss Dawson," the attorney said, his voice polite but firm, "did Mr. Clay harm you that night?" The courtroom waited. Emily opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lips quivered. Her chin trembled. And then she broke. Her tiny frame folded forward, hands covering her face as her small body shook with silent sobs. She couldn't do it. She was too afraid to speak. The man on trial, Gregory Clay, 44, her foster guardian, sat there, confident in his 3-piece suit. Arms crossed, eyes smug, like he'd already won. Most of the town knew the Dawsons. After Emily lost both her parents in a tragic car crash just a year ago, she became a symbol of fragile innocence in our community. But no one imagined that sweet piano-playing girl would end up in a courtroom like this as a victim. Her only family was gone. Her voice had left her, and her one source of courage. Missing. Max, her seeing-eye dog, a loyal German shepherd who vanished mysteriously just 2 days before the trial. He'd been her eyes, her comfort, and some believed her only witness to what happened that night. Without him, she felt like a broken compass in a storm. Now, as her quiet cries echoed through the chamber, jurors began to shift uncomfortably. Some shook their heads, others looked down. The judge leaned back in his chair, clearly conflicted. Across the aisle, the defense attorney stood and whispered smugly to his client, "She's too scared to talk. You're walking out of here today." The bailiff stepped forward, gently placing a hand on Emily's shoulder to help her down. And that's when the courtroom doors burst open. Every head turned. A loud bark cut through the silence like a bullet through glass. A German shepherd, muddy, breathless, padded into the courtroom, tongue lolling, fur coated in dust. His eyes scanned the room wildly until they locked onto her. "Emily, Max!" she gasped, lifting her head, tears frozen on her cheeks. He bolted toward her. She dropped her cane, arms outstretched, and the two collided in an embrace so full of emotion, it stunned the courtroom into stillness. But what happened next turned this case from tragedy to something the world would never forget. Max didn't just return. He had something in his mouth. A torn scrap of fabric, soiled, faded, but unmistakable. It bore the embroidered logo of Clay's construction company and something else. Dried blood. Emily's. Asps rippled through the room. The judge slammed his gavel. Bailiff seized that evidence. And suddenly, everything changed. Have you ever witnessed a dog do something you just couldn't explain? The judge banged his gavel again. "Order! I will have order in this court!" The bailiff rushed to retrieve the blood-stained fabric from Max's jaws, but the dog didn't flinch. Instead, Max stepped back and dropped it gently at Emily's feet, his gaze never leaving her tear-streaked face. Emily reached down, fingers trembling as they brushed the fabric. The moment she touched it, something inside her steadied. It was like holding Max, grounded her, like touching the past with her hands. Her voice returned soft but certain. "That's from the night it happened," she said. The courtroom stilled. She took a deep breath, her hands gripping Max's thick fur. "He grabbed me after dinner. I told him I didn't want to go into the garage, but he said if I didn't, he'd hurt Max. He hit me with something heavy. I woke up hours later, bleeding, locked in the shed." Gasps and murmurs fluttered across the courtroom, like leaves in a sudden wind. Clay shot up from his seat. "She's lying. That dog's been trained to do tricks. This is all an act." But it was too late. The judge nodded to the prosecution. "I want forensics to examine that cloth immediately and reopen discovery. We're not done here." For the first time since the trial began, Emily sat up straight, and Max, faithful and calm, sat at her side like a sentinel who'd been waiting for this moment all along. By the time the trial recessed for the day, word had spread far beyond the courthouse. Within hours, blind girl's dog reveals evidence in abuse trial was trending across national networks. Elderly veterans at the Oak Ridge VFW Hall passed around the paper in disbelief. At Doris's diner, pensioners who once debated politics now sat in silence, sipping coffee, wondering how they hadn't seen it sooner. Even across the Atlantic, British news programs picked up the story. Hero dog interrupts trial in the US, exposes child's abuser. But not everyone was cheering. Back in the quiet foster home where Emily once lived, Clay's former neighbor, Mrs. Jenny Holloway, trembled as she folded laundry. "I heard things," she whispered to herself, "but I never saw anything. And now, that sweet girl." People were beginning to realize just how many red flags they'd ignored. That night, Max sat quietly in a police kennel, his eyes wary. He'd been temporarily separated from Emily for evidence processing. Animal control officers gently swabbed his fur, examined his paws, checked for wounds or signs of abuse. One officer, a middle-aged man with a retired military canine of his own, knelt beside Max. "You saw everything, didn't you, boy?" he murmured. Max didn't bark, he didn't move, he just stared, unblinking. The officer continued, "You ran off to find help, that's why you disappeared. You were trying to bring proof." A short while later, investigators checked the area where Max was found, 10 miles outside of town near a ravine. There, under a pile of leaves and dirt, they found a burned trash barrel. Inside, Emily's blood-stained dress, half-burnt rags, and tools that matched the injuries she described. And a partially melted but unmistakable, a wrench with Clay's initials etched into the handle. The case had cracked wide open. On the 4th day of the trial, the court reconvened with heavy tension. The evidence found with Max's help had been submitted, processed, verified. Gregory Clay now sat hunched at the defense table, his once cocky demeanor gone, replaced by a sweating brow and twitching lip. His lawyer whispered, "They've got too much. You might want to take a deal." But before any deal could be struck, Emily was called back to the stand. This time, she wasn't alone. Max padded by her side, calm, dignified. The moment Emily took her seat, Max sat at her feet, placing one paw gently on her shoe. She smiled for the first time. Then she spoke. "I heard him say he'd make sure no one believed me, that everyone would think I was a confused little girl. But I wasn't confused, I was scared. And Max wasn't." She paused. Max remembered everything. Gregory Clay jumped to his feet. "Fine, you want the truth, you want the truth," she was mouthing off. "I told her not to snoop around my tools and she wouldn't listen." Gasps filled the room. The judge barked, "Mr. Clay, sit down." But the damage was done. The jury didn't need another second. They took only 2 hours to return a unanimous verdict, guilty on all charges. Emily wouldn't have to testify again. Clay would face 25 years minimum. As the judge read the sentencing, Emily clutched Max's collar with both hands, whispering, "We did it, Max." Reporters flooded the courthouse steps. People cheered, strangers cried. Inside, Judge Langston, a gruff man known for his no-nonsense rulings, stepped down from the bench and approached Emily. "I've seen many cases in my years," he said, "but never one where justice literally walked through the door on 4 legs. He knelt beside Max and scratched behind his ears. "You may have saved this girl's life, son." With the trial over, Emily was placed under the care of her late mother's cousin, Maggie, a gentle-hearted woman in her 50s who lived in nearby Ashford. Maggie had grown up with Emily's mom, and though they'd lost touch, she came running the moment she heard. Emily moved into a quiet farmhouse with a fenced yard and wide-open space for Max. It took time, but slowly the shadows in her heart began to lift. She took up piano again. She started school remotely, and every Thursday, she volunteered at the local animal shelter, helping pair seniors with companion dogs. Max stayed close, always. But one morning, Maggie noticed something odd. Emily had slept through a thunderstorm, her first peaceful night in weeks. And Max, he hadn't barked, not once. Maggie watched as Max climbed into Emily's bed, pressed his body close to hers, and rested his head near her heart. He knew she needed sleep more than anything. This wasn't just a service dog. This was family. Weeks later, letters started pouring in. From seniors in Canada, who said Max reminded them of war dogs they once knew. From a woman in Yorkshire, who'd lost her sight and said Emily gave her hope. From veterans across the US, who sent photos of their own German shepherd companions. One even said, "I'm 84, lost my sight in the Korean War, and never thought I'd cry again." But this story, this dog, it healed something in me. Emily would sit each evening, reading the letters aloud to Max. Sometimes she'd laugh, other times she'd cry. But every time she finished, Max would nuzzle her hand, as if saying, "You're not alone." On a crisp fall morning, the mayor of Oak Ridge held a special ceremony on the courthouse steps. Max was awarded the Medal of Civic Bravery, the first dog in county history to receive it. Emily stood beside him, holding the medal while the crowd applauded. She spoke to the audience, voice clear and confident. "He didn't just guide me, he believed me. When no one else could see the truth, Max did." The crowd rose to its feet. Many wept openly. Years passed. Emily grew older, stronger, more outspoken. She began visiting schools and nursing homes, sharing her story, teaching about the bond between humans and animals. Max, now graying at the muzzle, followed her every step. Eventually, Emily published a book titled "When Justice Has Four Paws." It became a bestseller, especially among readers 65 and older, who found in her story a sense of justice, loyalty, and hope. On a quiet winter night, surrounded by snow and candlelight, Max passed peacefully in his sleep, his head resting against Emily's knee. He was 13. Emily, now 17, wept openly, but not with the broken sobs of a girl lost in the dark. These were the tears of someone who had truly loved and been loved in return. She buried him beneath the old maple tree in Maggie's yard, where his collar hangs to this day. 2 months later, a local shelter called. They'd rescued a litter of pups abandoned by the roadside. One of them, a floppy-eared German shepherd with bright eyes, refused to leave Emily's side when she visited. Emily smiled. "Max sent you, didn't he?" She named him Truth, and as he trotted behind her, leash in hand, she turned to the camera during a school presentation and said, "When you're blind, you learn to listen closely. And when the world goes quiet, sometimes your dog will speak for you." Have you ever had a dog who did something unbelievable for you? Share your story in the comments.